Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charlotte. This is Quarantine Story Time. We've been using our time of sheltering in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19, digging into some classic literature. And a bit tongue-in-cheek, I chose probably one of the longest books in classic literature that I could think of, which is War and Peace. I just happen to have this wonderful translation sitting around waiting to be read. So we've been reading it for quite a few weeks now. The good news is I think we're about a quarter of the way through, so that's exciting. And the other good news is there's been a lot of flattening of the curve for COVID-19. So a lot of things are starting to slowly open up with lots of social distancing and consideration of others and precautions put in place. So that's great. Because of that, though, I may have to get back to a regular work schedule. So maybe in the coming weeks, I will be keeping you guys posted about possibly changing the time of the reading so that we can continue to finish this book, even if I am no longer available at 3 o'clock. But I will keep you posted on that. Also, I believe the George Floyd Memorial is happening right now, and I just want to send out my condolences to his family and friends. I'm sure you miss him a lot, and I'm really sorry for your loss. It was a senseless act of violence, of racism, and something I do not support or condone. I would also like to use this time and take a moment to just remind everyone that at least I would like to take a stand against racism in America, and against even the own prejudices that may have unconsciously been passed into me growing up as a white person in America, and that I would like to be an ally to people of all colors, not just people who look like myself, not just people that I know. And so to that end, after the video, I will have in the description, I'll be posting links for things you can help. Shout out to a friend of mine who is making t-shirts, and all the proceeds and all money made by the sale of these shirts are going to support Black Lives Matter. So I'll be ordering one, and you should too. He designed the shirt. It's just a black shirt, but it says Black lives deserve to rest in peace while they're still breathing. And so you can check those out on the Instagram page he created for it, which is Let Us Breathe 2020. Pretty easy to remember considering everything that's happening. So check those out, and shout out to my friend Reggie, who's making those. He's an amazing individual, an amazing friend, and I am very thankful to have him in my life. And so yeah, if you guys have any other great resources you want to share, I'll be putting some links up. There's plenty of things to watch too, other than myself, to educate yourself. I have like a watch list of things I want to watch. The movie Just Mercy, which deals a lot with help you understand systematic racism in America. So even if you don't feel like you are actively racist, there's a lot of systems in place that are designed to privilege one group of people over another based on the color of their skin. So something to think about. So right now, I believe it's streaming free on Amazon Prime. Warner Brothers, I believe, produced the film and will be providing it free rentals for it. So you can check that out. I know for sure it's streaming for free rentals right now on Amazon Prime. Not that that's promotion of Amazon Prime or anything. I'm gonna get flagged for saying all this. Also want to watch the 13th Amendment, or no, I think it's just called 13th, sorry. And that's a lot about incarceration. There's also like slightly more, if you don't want I'm going to put some links up for documentaries. There's also If Beale Street Could Talk. A lot of other great films that you can use to help broaden your understanding of the way someone else feels in your country or your community. Or if you're watching from out of the country, that's cool. Help you understand why America is weird and often very hurtful. Not cool. But for the time being, I'm going to focus on finishing what I started, which is War and Peace. And like I said, I think we're a quarter of the way through. Very exciting. We are now in volume 2, and I think that's of 4 volumes. But we're in volume 2, and we've started part 2 of that. So we'll start today with section 1 and read 1, 2, and sections 1, 2, and 3 in part 2 of volume 2 of War and Peace. So, hope you guys enjoy it as I am enjoying it for the first time here right now with you. So, volume 2, part 2, section 1. After his talk with his wife, Pierre went to Petersburg. At the Torshock posting station there were no horses, or else the postmaster did not want to give them to him. Pierre had to wait. Without undressing, he lay down on a leather sofa in front of a round table, put his big feet in their warm boots on the table, and lapsed into thought. Would you like to have the suitcases brought in? Would you like to have the bed made, or tea served? Asked his valet. Pierre did not reply because he heard and saw nothing. He had lapsed into a thought at the previous station and went on thinking about the same thing. So important that he paid no attention to what was happening around him. He not only was not interested in whether he would get to Petersburg sooner or later, or whether he would or would not find a place to rest in this situation, but compared with the thoughts that occupied him then, it was all the same to him whether he spent a few hours or his whole life at this station. The postmaster, his wife, the valet, a peasant woman with Torshock embroidery, kept coming into the room offering their services. Pierre, not changing the position of his raised leg, looked at them through his spectacles without understanding what they could possibly want or how they could possibly live without resolving the questions that occupied him. He had been occupied with the same question ever since the day he came back from Sokolniki after the duel and spent the first tormenting sleepless night, only now, in the solitude of the journey, they came over to him with particular force. Whatever he started thinking about, he came back to the same questions, which he could not resolve and could not stop asking himself. It was as if the main screw in his head, which held his life together, had become stripped. The screw would not go in, would not come out, but turned in the same groove without catching hold, and it was impossible to stop turning it. The postmaster came in and humbly began asking His Excellency to wait only 2 little hours, after which, come what might, he would give His Excellency post horses. The postmaster was obviously lying and only wanted to get extra money from the traveler. Is that bad or is it good? Pierre asked himself. For me it's good. For some other traveler it would be bad. And for the postmaster it's inevitable because he has nothing to eat. He says an officer gave him a thrashing on account of that. The officer gave him a thrashing because he had to leave soon. And I shot at Dólokhov because I considered myself insulted. And Louis XVI was executed because he was considered a criminal, and a year later those who executed him were also killed for something. What is bad? What is good? What should one love? What hate? Why live? And what am I? And what is life? And what is death? What power rules over everything? He asked himself, and there was no answer to any of these questions except one, which was not logical and was not at all an answer to the questions. This answer was, you will die, and everything will die. You will die and learn everything, or stop asking. But to die was also frightening. The Torshock peddler woman offered him her wares in a shrill voice, especially a pair of goatskin shoes. I have hundreds of rubles that I don't know what to do with, and she stands there in a tattered coat looking at me timidly, thought Pierre. And what does she need the money for? As if this money could add one hair's breadth to her happiness, her peace of mind. Can anything in the world make her or me less subject to evil and death, which will end everything and will come and must come today or tomorrow, in a moment anyhow, compared with eternity. And he again put pressure on the strip screw, and the screw kept turning in one and the same place. His servant handed him a book cut as far as the middle, an epistolary novel by Madame Souza. He started reading about the sufferings and virtuous struggle of some Amélie de Mansfield. And why did she struggle against her seducer, he wondered, if she loved him? God could not have put into her soul a yearning that was contrary to his will. My former wife didn't struggle, and maybe she was right. Nothing has been discovered, Pierre again said to himself. Nothing has been invented. We can know only that we know nothing, and that it is the highest degree of human wisdom. Everything within him and around him seemed confused, senseless, and loathsome. But in this very loathing for everything around him, Pierre took a sort of irritating pleasure. May I be so bold as to ask your Excellency To move over a little for this gentleman? Asked the postmaster, coming into the room and bringing in another traveler who was detained for lack of horses. This was a squat, large-boned, sallow, wrinkled old man with gray, beetling brows over glistening eyes of an indefinite grayish color. Pierre took his feet off the table, got up, and lay down on the bed prepared for him, glancing from time to time at the man who had come in and not looking at Pierre with a sullenly weary air, was undressing with difficulty, helped by a servant. Left in a fleece-lined nankeen coat, with felt boots on his skinny, bony legs, the traveler sat down on the sofa, leaned his close-cropped head, very big and broad at the temples, against the back, and looked at Bezukhov. The stern, intelligent, and penetrating expression of this look struck Pierre. He wanted to start a conversation with this traveler, but as he was preparing to address him with a question about the road, the traveler closed his eyes and folded his wrinkled old man's hands, on the finger of one of which was a big cast-iron signet ring with a death's head, sat motionless, either resting or, as it seemed to Pierre, reflecting deeply and calmly on something. The traveler's servant was also a sallow old man, all covered with wrinkles, with no beard or mustache, which evidently had not been shaved but had never grown. The agile old servant opened the cellaret and prepared the tea table, and brought a boiling samovar. When everything was ready, the traveler opened his eyes, moved to the table, and having poured himself a glass, poured another for the beardless old man, and handed it to him. Pierre was beginning to feel uneasiness and the necessity, even the unavoidability, of getting into conversation with this traveler. The servant brought back his empty, overturned glass and a bitten lump of sugar, and asked whether anything was needed. "Nothing. Give me the book," said the traveler. The servant gave him a book which looked like a spiritual one to Pierre, and the traveler immersed himself in reading. Pierre was looking at him. Suddenly the traveler set the book aside, having put in a bookmark, and closed it, and closing his eyes and leaning back, sat again in his former position. Pierre was looking at him, and had no time to turn away before the old man opened his eyes and fixed his firm and stern gaze directly on Pierre's face. Pierre felt embarrassed and wanted to avoid the gaze, but the old man's glittering eyes drew him irresistibly to them. Section 2. "I have the pleasure of speaking with Count Bezukhov, if I'm not mistaken," the traveler said, unhurriedly and loudly. Pierre looked silently and questioningly at his interlocutor through his spectacles. "I've heard about you," the traveler went on, "and about the misfortune that has befallen you, my dear sir." He underlined, as it were, the word misfortune, as if to say, "Yes, misfortune, whatever you may call it. I know that what happened to you in Moscow was a misfortune." "I am very sorry for it, my dear sir." Pierre blushed, and hastily lowering his legs from the bed, leaned towards the old man, smiling unnaturally and timidly. "I have mentioned it, my dear sir, not out of curiosity, but for more important reasons." He paused, not letting Pierre out of his gaze, and shifted on the sofa, inviting Pierre by this gesture to sit next to him. Pierre found it unpleasant to get into conversation with this old man, but, involuntarily submitting to him, he went over and sat down next to him. "You are unhappy, my dear sir," he went on. "You are young. I am old. I should like to help you as much as I can." "Ah, yes," said Pierre with an unnatural smile. "I'm very grateful. Where are you coming from?" The traveler's face was not gentle, but even cold and stern, yet in spite of that, his new acquaintance's words and face had an irresistibly attractive effect on Pierre. "But if for some reason you find conversation with me unpleasant," said the old man, "say so, my dear sir." And he suddenly seemed unexpectedly gentle. And he suddenly smiled an unexpectedly gentle, fatherly smile. "Ah, no, not at all. On the contrary, I'm very glad to make your acquaintance," said Pierre, and glancing once again at his new acquaintance's hands, took a closer look at his ring. He saw a death's head on it, a Masonic sign. "Allow me to ask," he said, "are you a Mason?" "Yes, I belong to the Brotherhood of Freemasons," said the traveler, peering more and more deeply into Pierre's eyes, "and I give you a brotherly handshake on my own behalf and on theirs." "I'm afraid," said Pierre, smiling and hesitating between the trust which the Mason personally inspired in him and his habit of mocking Masonic beliefs, "I'm afraid I'm very far from understanding. How shall I put it? I'm afraid my way of thinking about the universe is so much the opposite of yours that we won't understand each other." Your way of thinking is known to me, said the mason, and this way of thinking of yours, which you are talking about, and which seems to you the result of your own mental work, is the way of thinking of the majority of people, the monotonous fruit of pride, laziness, and ignorance. Forgive me, my dear sir, but if I did not know it, I would not be talking with you. Your way of thinking is a lamentable error. Just as I may suppose you have fallen into error, Pierre said with a weak smile. I shall never dare to say that I know the truth, said the mason, amazing Pierre more and more with his definite and firm speech. No one can attain to the truth by himself, only stone by stone, with the participation of all. Over millions of generations, from our forefather Adam down to our time, is the temple being built which is to become a worthy dwelling place for the great God, said the mason, and he closed his eyes. I must tell you that I don't believe in God, Pierre said with regret and effort, feeling the need to speak the whole truth. The mason looked at Pierre attentively and smiled, as a rich man holding millions in his hand would smile at a poor man who has said to him that he, the poor man, did not have the 5 rubles that would make his happiness. But you don't know him, my dear sir, said the mason. You cannot know him, you don't know him, and that is why you are unhappy. Yes, I am unhappy, Pierre agreed, but what am I to do? You don't know him, my dear sir, and that is why you are unhappy. You don't know him, but he is here. He is in me. He is in my words. He is in you, and even in that blasphemous talk you have just produced, the mason said in a stern, trembling voice. He paused and sighed, obviously trying to calm himself. If he did not exist, he said softly, we would not be talking about him. But, my dear sir, what? Whom are we talking about? Whom have you denied? He said suddenly, with rapturous sternness and power in his voice. Who invented him? If he does not exist, why has the supposition appeared in you that there is such an incomprehensible being? Why do you and the whole world suppose the existence of such an unfathomable being, a being almighty, eternal, and infinite in all his qualities? He stopped and was silent for a long time. Pierre could not and did not want to break that silence. He exists, but it is hard to understand him, the mason spoke again, not looking at Pierre's face, but straight ahead, leafing through his book with his old man hands, which could not remain still, but because of his inner turmoil. If you doubted the existence of some man, I would bring this man to you. I would take him by the hand and show him to you. But how can I, an insignificant mortal, show his almightiness, all his eternity, all his goodness to one who is blind, who closes his eyes so as not to see, not to understand his own loathsomeness and depravity? He paused. Who are you? What are you? You fancy that you're wise because you were able to utter those blasphemous words, he said with a gloomy and scornful smile. But you are more foolish and mad than a little child who, playing with some part of a skillfully made clock, would dare say that, since he does not understand the purpose of this clock, he does not believe in the master who made it. It is hard to know him. For centuries, starting with our forefather Adam and down to our days, we have been working towards that knowledge and are infinitely far from reaching our goals. But we see our incomprehension only as our weakness and his grandeur. With a swelling heart and with glittering eyes, Pierre gazed into the mason's face, listened to him, did not interrupt him, did not ask anything, and believed with his whole soul that what this stranger was telling him. Whether he believed those reasonable arguments in the mason's speech, or believed, as children do, the intonations, convictions, and heartfelt emotion in the mason's speech, the trembling of his voice, which sometimes almost interrupted him, or those glittering old man's eyes, grown old in that conviction, or the calmness, firmness, and knowledge of purpose, which shone in the mason's whole being, and which struck him especially strongly, compared with his own slackness and hopelessness. In any case, he wanted to believe with his whole soul, and he did believe, and experienced a joyful feeling of peace, renewal, and return to life. He is not apprehended by reason, but by life, said the mason. I don't understand, said Pierre, fearfully sensing doubt arising in him. He feared the vagueness and weakness of his interlocutor's arguments. He feared not believing him. I don't understand, he said. How is it that human reason cannot apprehend the knowledge you speak of? The mason smiled his meek, fatherly smile. The highest wisdom and truth is like the most pure liquid, which we want to receive into ourselves, he said. Can I receive this pure liquid in an impure vessel and then judge its purity? Only by purifying myself inwardly can I keep the liquid I receive pure to some degree. Yes, yes, that's so, Pierre said joyfully. The supreme wisdom is based not on reason alone, not on the secular science of physics, history, chemistry, and so on, into which rational knowledge is divided. The higher knowledge has one science, the science of the all, the science that explains the whole universe and the place man occupies in it. To contain this science, it is necessary to purify and renew one's inner man, and thus before we can know, one must believe and perfect oneself. And to achieve that, a divine light, called conscience, has been put in our soul. Yes, yes, said Pierre agreed. Look at your inner man with spiritual eyes and ask if you are pleased with yourself. What have you achieved, being guided by reason alone? What are you? You are young, you are rich, you are educated, my dear sir. What have you done with all these good things that have been given to you? Are you content with yourself and your life? No, I hate my life, Pierre said, wincing. Excuse me. If you hate it, change it, purify yourself, and insofar as you purify yourself, you will learn wisdom. Look at your life, my dear sir. How have you been spending it? In riotous orgies and depravity? Taking everything from society and giving it nothing? You received wealth. How have you used it? What have you done for your neighbor? Have you thought about the tens of thousands of your slaves? Have you helped them physically and morally? No, you have used their labor in order to lead a debauched life. This is what you have done. Have you chosen some position in which you could be useful to your neighbor? No, you have been spending your life in idleness. Then, my dear sir, you married, taking upon yourself the responsibility for guiding a young woman. And what did you do? You did not help her, my dear sir, to find the path of truth. You hurled her into an abyss of deceit and misfortune. A man insulted you, and you shot him, and you say that you do not know God and hate your life. That is no wonder, my dear sir. After these words, the mason, as if tired of talking for so long, again leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. Pierre looked at this stern, motionless, almost dead fellow, and moved his lips soundlessly. He wanted to say, yes, a loathsome, idle, depraved life, but he dared not break the silence. The mason cleared his throat hoarsely, as old people do, and called for his servant. What about the horses? He asked, not looking at Pierre. The relay has been brought, the servant answered. Won't you get some rest? No, tell them to harness up. Can it be he'll go away and leave me alone without finishing what he was saying and without promising to help me? Thought Pierre, getting up and beginning to pace the room with his head lowered, glancing occasionally at the mason. Yes, I don't think about it, but I've led a contemptible, depraved life, and I don't like it or want it, thought Pierre. But this man knows the truth, and if he wanted, he could reveal it to me. Pierre wanted to say that to the mason, but he did not dare. The traveler, having packed his things, was buttoning up his coat with his old, accustomed hands. When he finished, he turned to Bazukov and said to him indifferently, in a polite tone, Where are you going now, my dear sir, if I may ask? Me? To Petersburg, Pierre replied in a childish, irresolute voice. Thank you, I agree with you in everything, but I don't think I'm so bad. I wish with all my soul to be with you, be what you want me to be, but I've never found help from anybody. However, I am to blame for it all in the first place. Help me, teach me, and maybe I'll... Pierre could not go on. He snuffed his nose and turned away. The mason was silent for a long time, evidently thinking something over. Help is given only by God, he said. But that measure of help which our order has in its power to give you, it will give you, my dear sir. You're going to Petersburg. Give this to Count Wilarski. He took out his pocketbook and wrote a few words on a large sheet of paper, folded in four. Allow me to give you one piece of advice. When you arrive in the capital, devote the initial time to solitude, to examining yourself, and do not set out on the former ways of life. With that, I wish you a good journey, my dear sir, he said, noticing that his servant had come into the room. And success. The traveler was Osip Alexievich Bazdiev, as Pierre learned from the postmaster's register. Bazdiv had been one of the best-known masons and Martinis, even back in Novikov's time. Long after his departure, Pierre, neither going to bed nor asking for horses, paced his station house room, thinking over his depraved past, and with a rapture of renewal, picturing to himself his blissful, irreproachable, and virtuous future, which seemed so easy to him. He had been depraved, it seemed to him, only because he had somehow accidentally forgotten how good it was to be virtuous. In his soul there remained no trace of his former doubts. He firmly believed in the possibility of brotherhood of people, united with purpose of supporting each other on the path of virtue, and that was what he imagined Masonry to be. On arriving in Petersburg, Pierre did not inform anyone of his arrival, did not go out anywhere, and started spending the whole day reading Thomas à Kempis, a book which some unknown person had delivered to him. Pierre understood one thing and one thing only while reading this book. He understood the delight, previously unknown to him, of the possibility of achieving perfection and the possibility of brotherly and active love among people, which Osip Alexievich had revealed to him. A week after his arrival, the young Polish Count Wilarski, whom Pierre knew superficially in Petersburg society, came into his room in the evening with that official and solemn look with which Dólokhov's second had come to him, and closing the door behind him and making sure that no one was in the room except Pierre, he addressed him. "I've come to you with a suggestion and a message, Count," he said, without sitting down. "A person very highly placed in our brotherhood has solicited for you to be received into the brotherhood before the fixed term, and has suggested that I be your sponsor. I consider it my sacred duty to fulfill the will of this person. Do you wish, under my sponsorship, to enter the brotherhood of Freemasons?" The cold and severe tone of this man, whom he had almost always seen at balls with an amiable smile, in the society of the most brilliant women, struck Pierre. "Yes, I do," he said. Wilarski inclined his head. "One more question, Count," he said, "which I ask you to answer not as a future Mason, but as an honest man, galant homme. In all sincerity, have you renounced your former convictions? Do you believe in God?" Pierre reflected. Yes, I believe in God," he said. "In that case," Wilarski began, but Pierre interrupted him. "Yes, I believe in God," he said once more. "In that case we can go," said Wilarski. "My carriage is at your service." Wilarski was silent the whole way. To Pierre's question of what he must do and how to answer, Wilarski said only that brothers more worthy than he would test him, and that Pierre need do nothing more than tell the truth. Having driven through the gates of a big house where the lodge was quartered and gone up a dark stairway, they went into a small, well-lit anteroom, where they took off their fur coats without the help of servants. From the anteroom they went into another room. Some man in strange attire appeared at the door. Wilarski, going to meet him, said something to him quietly in French, and went over to a small wardrobe in which Pierre noticed kinds of attire he had never seen before. Taking a cloth out of the wardrobe, Wilarski put it over Pierre's eyes and knotted it behind, catching Pierre's hair painfully. Then he drew him to himself, kissed him, and taking his hand, led him somewhere. The hair caught in the knot caused him pain. He winced and smiled from the pain and shame at something. His enormous figure, with lowered arms and wincing, smiling physiognomy, moved after Wilarski with uncertain, timid steps. Having led him by the hand some 10 paces, Wilarski stopped. "Whatever happens to you," he said, "you must courageously endure everything, if you are firmly resolved to enter our brotherhood." Pierre responded affirmatively by inclining his head. "When you hear knocking on the door, you will unbind your eyes," said Wilarski. "I wish you courage and success." And pressing Pierre's hand, Wilarski went out. Left alone, Pierre went on smiling in the same way. He shrugged his shoulders a couple times, put his hands on the cloth as if wishing to take it off, and lowered it again. The 5 minutes he spent blindfolded seemed like an hour to him. His hands became swollen, his legs gave way under him. It seemed to him that he was tired. He experienced the most complex and varied feelings. He was afraid of what was going to happen to him, and still more afraid that he would show his fear. He was curious to know what he was going to go through, and what would be revealed to him, but most of all he felt joy that the moment had come in which he would finally enter the path of renewal and an actively virtuous life which he had been dreaming of since his meeting with Osip Alexeyevich. There was loud knocking on the door. Pierre took off the blindfold and looked around. The room was pitch dark. Only in one place a lamp was burning inside something white. Pierre went closer and saw that the lamp was sitting on a black table on which lay an open book. The book was the Gospel. The white thing in which the lamp was burning was a human skull with its holes and teeth. Having read the first word of the Gospel, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God," Pierre went around the table and saw a large open box filled with something. This was a coffin with bones. He was not surprised in the least by what he saw. Hoping to enter a totally new life, totally different from his former one, he expected everything to be extraordinary, still more extraordinary than what he saw. A skull, a coffin, the Gospel. It seemed he expected it all, had expected still more. Trying to call up a tender feeling in himself, he looked around. God, death, love, the brotherhood of man, he said to himself, connecting vague but joyful notions of something with these words. The door opened and someone came in. By the faint light to which Pierre's eyes, however, had become accustomed, a short man came in. Evidently having come from light into darkness, the man stopped, then moved with cautious steps towards the table and placed on it his small hands covered with leather gloves. This short man was wearing a white leather apron that covered his chest and part of his legs. On his neck there was some sort of necklace, and behind the necklace rose a high white jabot, framing his elongated face, which was lit from below. "Why have you come here?" asked the man, turning in the direction of Pierre, who had made a slight rustle. "Why have you, who did not believe in the truths of the light and do not see the light, why have you come here? What do you want from us? Wisdom, virtue, enlightenment?" At the moment when the door opened and the unknown man came in, Pierre experienced a feeling of fear and awe, similar to what he experienced in childhood at confession. He felt himself alone with a man who was a total stranger in the circumstances of life, yet close in the brotherhood of men. With a pounding heart that took his breath away, Pierre moved towards the rhetor, so the Masons called a brother who prepares a seeker to enter the brotherhood. Coming closer, Pierre recognized the rhetor as an acquaintance, Smolyanov, but it offended him to think that he was an acquaintance. The man who had come in was only a brother and a virtuous preceptor. For a long time, Pierre could not utter a word, so that the rhetor had to repeat the question. "Yes, I want renewal," Pierre uttered with difficulty. "Very well," said Smolyanov, and he went on at once. "Do you have any idea by the means of which our holy order can help you achieve your goal?" The rhetor asked calmly and quickly. I hope for guidance, help in my renewal," Pierre said in a trembling voice and speaking with difficulty, owing to his excitement and to being unused to speaking about abstract subjects in Russian. "What is your notion of Freemasonry?" "I presume that Freemasonry is the fraternité and equality of men, with virtuous goals," said Pierre, embarrassed, even as he was speaking, by the unsuitability of his words to the solemnity of the moment. "I presume—" "Very well," said the rhetor said hastily, evidently fully satisfied with this reply. "Have you sought the means of achieving your goal in religion?" "No, I considered it incorrect and did not follow it," Pierre said, so softly that the rhetor did not hear, and asked him what he had said. "I was an atheist," Pierre replied. "You seek the truth in order to follow its laws in life. Consequently, you seek wisdom and virtue, is that it?" the rhetor said after a moment's silence. Yes, Pierre agreed. The rhetor cleared his throat, folded his gloved hands on his chest, and began to speak. "Now I must reveal to you the main goal of our order," he said, "and if this goal coincides with yours, it will be useful for you to enter our brotherhood. The first main goal, and withal the foundation of our order, on which it is established and which no human power can cast down, is the preservation and handing on to posterity of a certain important mystery, which has come down to us from ancient times, and even from the first man, on which mystery perhaps the fate of the human race depends. But as it is the nature of this mystery that no one can know it and use it unless he has been prepared by long and diligent self-purification, not everyone can hope to attain it. Therefore we have a second goal, which consists in preparing our members as much as possible, setting their hearts to rights, purifying and enlightening their reason, by means revealed to us by tradition from men who labored in search of this mystery, and thereby make them capable of apprehending it. In purifying and setting to right our members, we try, thirdly, to set to rights the whole human race, offering it through our members an example of piety and virtue, and thereby trying with all our might to oppose the evil that reigns in the world. Think it over, and I will come to you again, he said, and left the room. To oppose the evil that reigns in the world, Pierre repeated, and he pictured his future activity on this path. He pictured people such as himself had been 2 weeks ago, and he mentally addressed them. He pictured people such as he himself had been 2 weeks ago. He mentally addressed to them a didactic and admonitory speech. He pictured depraved and unfortunate people whom he helped in word and deed. He pictured oppressors whose victims he saved. Of the 3 goals mentioned by the rhetor, this last one, setting mankind to rights, was specifically close to Pierre. The certain important mystery which the rhetor had mentioned, though it aroused his curiosity, did not seem essential to him, and the second goal, purifying and setting him to rights, interested him little, because at the moment he enjoyed feeling himself already fully set to rights from his former vices and ready only for the good. Half an hour later, the rhetor came back to transmit to the seeker the 7 virtues corresponding to the 7 steps of Solomon's temples, which every Mason was supposed to cultivate in himself. These virtues were 1. Discretion, keeping the secrets of the order. 2. Obedience to the higher ranks of the order. 3. Good morals. 4. Love of mankind. 5. Courage. 6. Generosity. And 7. Love of death. 7th, said the rhetor, try by frequent thoughts of death to bring yourself to the point where it no longer seems a fearsome enemy to you, but a friend who delivers the soul grown weary in the labors of virtue from this calamitous life and leads it to a place of recompense and peace. Yes, that shall be so, thought Pierre, when after these words the rhetor went away again, leaving him to his solitary reflections. That should be so, but I am still so weak that I love my life, the meaning of which is only now being gradually revealed to me. But he did not feel in his soul the other 5 virtues that he remembered, counting them on his fingers: courage and generosity and good morals and love of mankind, and especially obedience, which even seemed to him not a virtue but happiness itself. It was so joyful for him now to be delivered from his arbitrariness and submit his will to a person or persons who knew the unquestionable truth. Pierre forgot the 7th virtue and simply could not recall what it was. The 3rd time the rhetor came back sooner and asked Pierre whether he was still firm in his intention and was determined to submit himself to everything that was demanded of him. I'm ready for everything, said Pierre. I must also inform you, said the rhetor, that our order conveys its teaching not only by words, but by other means, which affect the true seeker of wisdom, and virtue perhaps even more strongly than verbal explanation. This temple, with its decorations which you see, must already have explained to your heart, if it is sincere, more than words can do. You will see, perhaps, during your further initiation, a similar means of explanation. Our order imitates ancient societies which revealed their teachings through hieroglyphics. A hieroglyph, said the rhetor, is the designation of something, not subject to the senses, which contains in itself qualities similar to what it is imagining. It is imaging. Pierre knew very well what a hieroglyph was, but did not dare to speak. He listened silently to the rhetor, feeling from it all that the testing was about to begin. If you are firm, then I must commence your induction, said the rhetor, coming closer to Pierre. As a sign of generosity, I ask you to give me all your valuables. But I have nothing with me, said Pierre, thinking that he was being asked to hand over everything he owned. That is, what you have with you. A watch, money, rings. Pierre hurriedly took out his purse, his watch, but for a long time could not get the wedding ring off his fat finger. When that was finished, the mason said, "As a sign of obedience, I ask you to undress." Pierre took off his tailcoat, his waistcoat, and his left boot, as the writer directed. The mason opened his shirt on his left breast, and bending down, pulled up his left trouser leg above the knee. Pierre wanted hurriedly to take off his right boot and pull up his trouser to spare the stranger the effort. But the mason said there was no need for that, and handed him a slipper for his left foot. With a childish smile of embarrassment, doubt, and self-mockery which came to his face against his will, Pierre stood with lowered arms and straddled legs before his brother Rhetor, waiting for new orders from him. "And fine, as a sign of open-heartedness, I ask you to reveal to me your main predilection," he said. "My predilection? I had so many," said Pierre. "The predilection which, more than all the others, made you vacillate on the path of virtue," said the mason. Pierre paused, searching. "Wine, gluttony, idleness, laziness, hot temper, anger, women?" He went through his vices, weighing them mentally, and did not know which to give preference to. "Women," Pierre said in a low, barely audible voice. The mason did not stir and did not speak for a long time before this reply. At last he moved towards Pierre, took the cloth that was lying on the table, and again blindfolded him. "I tell you for the last time, turn all your attention to yourself, lay chains upon your feelings, and seek blessedness not in passions, but in your own heart. The source of blessedness is not outside, but inside us." Pierre already felt in himself that refreshing source of blessedness which now filled his soul with joy and tender feeling. And that is where we will stop for today. I did not expect Freemasons, that's all I have to say. Very interesting. We will see where this will lead Pierre. Who always seemed like a character looking for guidance. But I did like some of what the Masons had to say. About caring for one another and using whatever gifts you have to seek betterment of other people. That seemed wise in general and also very timely right now. So, to that point, I will be posting links of ways that we can help, that anyone can help support Black Lives Matter and the cause of racial equality in America, and also justice against police brutality. So I'll drop some links in the video description after this. So if you're on here now, just click back on this video after it's ended, and in like a few minutes, and I'll have some links up. And you can always drop stuff in the live chat with any links or ideas you have. And I thank you guys for tuning in today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay loving.